Hi, my name is Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to reflect on my reading in 2022, look at some stats, look at how well I met or did not meet my goals that I set myself for 2022, and also look at my reading plans and goals for 2023. So first up, the stats. In 2022 I read a total of 154 books, which apparently is 45,691 pages. I did read fewer books in 2022 than in the previous year. In 2021 I read 193 books. That really is, I think, because part of 2021 we were in lockdown, stuff wasn't open, so I inevitably did more reading than usual. I didn't set myself a numerical goal this year in terms of number of books I wanted to read, because for me I just don't find that particularly helpful. So yeah, 154 books is what I've read. In terms of where those books have come from, and I haven't looked at this stat before, so this is the first year that I have the information on it, but around 2/3 of those books came from the library. So obviously around 1/3 came from my own bookshelves. And so that's pretty good, because I think in previous years I've probably read, I reckon around 80% of my reading historically has come from the library. And I did make an effort in 2022 to read more books from my shelves, particularly in the last month or so with the Read What You Own challenge, which I'll talk about a bit more later on. But throughout the year I have tried to slot in more books from my bookshelves into my monthly reading. So I'm actually really pleased with that. I hadn't expected to have read that many books from my shelf until I looked at the stats earlier on today. So that's really good. I DNF'd 72 books in 2022. So my DNF rate for the year overall is at around 32%. So 1 in every 3 books that I pick up I end up DNFing. 2022 was the first year that I started to log my DNFs. So that's quite interesting. I DNF a lot of books, as you may know if you've been here for a while. And it wasn't until I started BookTube that I realised that I probably have a higher DNF rate than the average person. I do think part of that is because a lot of my books come from the library. I have done a separate video about DNFing and how that sort of influences my reading, which I'll link down below if you haven't seen that already. So yeah, around a 32% DNF rate for the year. So we'll look at some of the story graphs, shall we? I'll insert them somewhere here, and I'll link below to my story graph as well, so you can follow me on there if you want to. In terms of the moods of the books that I read in 2022, the sort of most read moods, I guess, were mysterious, dark, emotional, reflective, and tense. I think that's fairly average for me. In terms of pace, around half the books I read were medium paced, around a quarter slow, and a quarter fast. In terms of page number, half of the books I read were between 300 to 500 pages. 45% were fewer than 300 pages, and just 5% were over 500 pages. When we come to look at my goals for 2022, we will talk a bit more about reading longer books. In terms of fiction and non-fiction, I think, yeah, I only read one non-fiction book in 2022. I'm not a big non-fiction reader, but that is like fewer non-fiction than I'd usually read in a year, I would say. But that's fine. I mean, I'm not particularly bothered about that. And then in terms of genres, this is quite interesting. So my top genres were mystery, followed by literary, contemporary, thriller, crime, and then LGBTQIA+. So this is interesting because I only started recording my reading at all in 2018, and for the first 3 years, mystery, thriller, and crime were my top 3 genres. But literary and contemporary have crept into my top 3 now, and I think that is because of BookTube. I think because most of the recommendations that I get from BookTube are in those genres. I mean, what is literary as a genre and what is contemporary as a genre? That's probably a conversation for another day, but you know what I mean. Yeah, most of the recommendations I get from BookTube are, I guess, sort of literary fiction, and I do follow book prizes more closely nowadays as well, like the Women's Prize and the Booker Prize. So I think that's why I tend to read more of those than I have done previous. Mystery is still my favourite because I feel like mystery can cover a whole range of things. Obviously that can come into thriller and crime, but then, you know, some of the historical fiction I read tends to have a mysterious element to it as well. Horror can come into mystery, so yeah. LGBTQ, I think I do read more books from that sort of genre than previous, and I do think I get some great recommendations in that area from BookTube as well. And then, in terms of my average star rating, so my average star rating for 2022 was 3.34%, so I'll put the graph up here that shows my ratings. Now, I think that my star ratings are slightly lower than the average booktuber from what I can tell, because for me a 3-star rating, when I give a 3-star, that means I enjoyed the book. I give star ratings based on my enjoyment of the book. 3-star means I enjoyed it. If I give a 2-star, that means I wasn't keen, but a 1-star, it means I actually actively dislike the book. So 3.34 stars is fine. And then I did have a look at how many books I gave under 3 stars. And 20% of the books that I read, as in I actually finished reading, so this doesn't include DNFs, 20% of the books that I read, I gave less than 3 stars, which feels like it may be a little bit high. I don't know, but then looking at some of my 2-star books, I don't necessarily hate those 2-star books. They just weren't great. So yeah, so those are the stats. Then let's have a look at my goals for 2022 and how well I did or didn't do. I am very aware that partway through 2022 I kind of just stopped looking at my goals because I wasn't that interested, but I've done better than I expected. So my first goal was I wanted to do more rereading of books, and I've actually reread 12 books in 2022. So that works out obviously at 1 a month. I don't think it actually was 1 a month, but you know what I mean. So in terms of my rereading, then I've reread 2 books by Sarah Waters, which was Fingersmith and The Night Watch. I reread 4 books by Agatha Christie, which was Five Little Pigs, Cards on the Table, Cat Among the Pigeons. Those 3 are all Poirot. And then I reread a standalone, Destination Unknown. And then my other rereads were The Midwich Cuckoos by John Wyndham, Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, Under the Skin by Michelle Faber, The Sense of an Ending by Julian Barnes, Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, and The Behaviour of Moths by Poppy Adams. So 12 rereads is actually pretty good. Another one of my goals was I wanted to make time to read more big books, because I think like a lot of people, I do put off reading longer books. I find them quite intimidating. So I did list a number of long books that I wanted to sort of head to in 2022. The Sea by Iris Murdoch was one of them, which I did read and did enjoy. The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton, I DNF'd. But then I have actually apparently read 7 books that were over 500 pages, according to Storygraph. Although one of those books is a short story collection, so it doesn't quite count. But let me tell you what they were. Okay, so the books that I read that were over 500 pages were Fingersmith by Sarah Waters, the Penguin Book of Japanese Short Stories, doesn't really count because it's not a novel, but anyway. The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown, which I read for Gob August. The Night Watch by Sarah Waters. The Sea by Iris Murdoch. The Book of Form and Emptiness by Ruth Zecchi. And Out by Natsuo Korino, which I hated. So those are the big books that I read. So there are still some books that I had mentioned wanting to read that I do want to read at some point. such as The Unconsoled by Kazuo Ishiguro. I have a copy up there. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. I received a copy in the post the other week, so I'll get to that one at some point, but that's like, I think, almost 1,000 pages long, so that does scare me a little bit. And then my third goal that I had for 2022 was to read more classics. So I'm not a big classics reader. I mean, I've always read some classics, but I'm just not a big classics reader. So of the ones that I listed that I wanted to read, I read Morris by E.M. Forster, which I really, really liked. And I read The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte, which I enjoyed. I DNF'd 3 of the classics that I mentioned I wanted to read. So I DNF'd Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, Emma by Jane Austen, and Dracula by Bram Stoker. I did read almost all of Dracula. I DNF with like 50 pages to go, which I know is a bit daft, but anyway, it was almost a win. And then there were a number of other classics that I did read in 2022, which I hadn't listed as being the ones that I wanted to head to, but I did read them. So as well as Morris and The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, I did a reread of Picture of Dorian Gray, and then I also read The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells, Wide Sargasso Sea by Jean Rhys, Carmilla by J. Sheridan Le Fanu, Passing by Nella Larson, Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, and The Bell by Iris Murdoch. So that's 8 classics in total, which is not too bad actually, for someone who doesn't really read a lot of classics. Of the ones that I mentioned that I still haven't got to, I do at some point really want to read some Thomas Hardy. Probably Tess and the D'Urbervilles to start off with. I want to read Crime and Punishment, or at least give it a go at some point. I have got a copy down there. And I'd also quite like to read Villette by Charlotte Bronte at some point. I'm not setting any of those as goals for 2023, so there are some books there that I do still want to head to at some point, but it'll be a case of when I'm in the right mood for them. I feel like, I don't know, sometimes when I tell myself I want to read a certain book within a certain time frame, it just puts me off from wanting to pick that up, so we'll see. But in terms of my actual goals for 2023, I have 3 goals. The first goal is quite straightforward. It is to continue and probably finish my little project of rereading all of Sarah Waters' novels. So far I've reread 3 of the 6 novels. So I still need to reread The Paying Guests, Tipping the Velvet, and The Little Stranger. My second goal is to complete my Read What You Own challenge. So I have done a separate video about this challenge, which I'll link down below. Basically, I've pledged to read 25 books from my bookshelves before buying any more books, or before getting any more books out of the library, which is the sort of key thing for me. So as of today, I have read 11 of those 25 books. So it's going okay, and I'm really enjoying it actually. Like, I do kind of miss my library visits and coming back with a big pile of library books, but I'm really, really enjoying reading the books that have been sitting on my shelves for ages, because most of them are books that I was really excited to read, so it's great to finally get around to them. So I want to complete that challenge. It'll probably take me, I imagine, till maybe the end of February to finish that. And then my third goal, as sort of carrying on from the Read What You Own challenge, is that I want to make sure that I continue to pick up books from my own shelves. And I think I have made a good start on that in 2022. You know, if only 2/3 of my reading came from the library, that's, you know, and I've read, 1/3 of books I've read have come from my bookshelves. With the Read What You Own challenge as well, that's making a big dint in it. So what I'm thinking is, I don't know, I've got a couple of thoughts. Maybe making the Read What You Own challenge an annual thing, or maybe a 6-monthly thing, but as well trying to make sure that every month I'm reading a few books from my shelves, along with library books. So yeah, that's kind of my main goal for the year. I don't buy that many books at all. When I do buy books, it's either in charity shops or it's secondhand online. I do have a book subscription service that I get 2 books a month. They're both secondhand books. And I've recently had my book advent calendar. So I've acquired 12 books through that. I still have some books from last year's advent calendar that I haven't got to yet. And it's not that I don't want to read them, it's just, I don't know, getting to them and not being distracted by all the lovely new library books. So yeah, so those are my main goals, I think, for 2023. Not too challenging, very achievable. So yeah, let me know if you've got any goals for 2023, and let me know sort of if you managed to achieve your goals for 2022. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're well, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Bye.